Hey friend, so this video is for PCOS, but it's also for anybody who's having issues losing weight. Now, I want to show you, okay, so this is what I currently look like. You know, I'm like all about transparency, all about really realness. So this is my current figure, you know, like I'm like leaner. I've got my back muscles, gonna see my little turn. Okay, so for those of you who know me, I am an ex-bodybuilder, right? So this is what I used to look like. This was about 2015. And this was also what I looked like. This was about like 2016, 2017. Now, long story short, I was somebody who really struggled with my weight for a long period of time. Like I was very up and down. My PCOS was very uncontrolled. It was like my period came when it wanted to, and now everything's regulated. Like my hormones are good. My weight has been, like, knock on wood, stabilized for I want to say a couple of years now, and my period comes like clockwork. So I want to kind of give you the tools as to, you know, how I did this and, you know, what process I took to get there, because I want you to know that it doesn't have to always be up and down, and there doesn't need to be that yo-yo effect with PCOS, and you can really stabilize your weight. It really just comes to, you have to look at things from a very like multi-dimensional standpoint. Like you really do need to incorporate your emotions. You have to think about the very spiritual aspect and the journey through weight loss. Like there is a very positive aspect to that, to get you to a place where you really love your body and you love who you are regardless of what anybody says and how that impacts you. And that was really a strength for me and a learning curve for me, was to get into my body and love it and not care, you know, whether I lost weight or what the world thought about me. Because when you're in a bodybuilding stand, or when you're in a bodybuilding spotlight, it's all about judgment. It's all about how good you look and, you know, what you rank on stage and how good your physique is and the likes and the comments and all that stuff. So that aside, weight loss is really just about, number one, obviously nutrition. Number two, stabilizing your hormones. Number three, really taking that spiritual and that emotional journey to heart and doing that healing. So number one, obviously exercise is really important for PCOS, but this physique is 2 years of not exercising. And I think one of the biggest things for PCOS, and for me personally, I was trying to outrun or out exercise my PCOS. And I know so many women do this. It's like you're trying to get ahead of the number on the scale. And this is very toxic, because you're going to be going to the gym. You're going to be trying to run off your calories or whatever your routine is. I mean, I went like 7 days a week, 6 days a week. I was taking pre-workouts. I was on fat burners. Like I just did everything under the sun to try and lose weight. And all it ended up doing was making me lose weight temporarily and then packing the pounds on after. So you want to find a gym routine that stabilizes you. And it depends on where you are on the spectrum. So I will be doing a video on, I'll be running a mitochondrial boot camp. And these are for people who are on the other side of the spectrum of PCOS. I'll also be putting together a training program. I do have a free guide for you guys that I will have available, but there will be one to purchase too that's kind of like the advanced version. Because obviously there's just so much detail for things. But PCOS is really a spectrum. So there's women in the early stages of PCOS, and then there's women in the middle, and then there's women in the later stages. Now, the longer that the insulin resistance goes on, the longer that your periods are dysregulated, the more weight gain you have, the more that it starts to push you on the spectrum. So you can start off pretty good and pretty stabilized, and that's where we see women who don't really have weight issues with PCOS. They're kind of at that like other end of the spectrum, where you're chronic fatigue, you're really tired, you're packing on the pounds, you're over exercising, you're on the other side of the spectrum. Now, I want you to think about this in a very layered form. So everything that I do is looking at the different aspects of the body. So I'm not just going to talk about the hormones. I'm not just going to be talking about your lifestyle. I'm not just going to be talking about the immune system, etc., glucose, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to look at things from different layers. So with PCOS, my number one thing is insulin resistance. So where are you on the curve? Where are you on the spectrum? And then what can I do, number one, to reduce that amount of insulin resistance? Now, dietary choices depend on your body, but there are two dietary choices that I've noticed that are quite fast acting for insulin resistance and for people with the PCOS body type. And number one is high protein. Number two is ketogenic. Now, you have to be doing these diets appropriately. prime example is my own personal experience, because when I did a ketogenic diet, I did a fatty ketogenic diet, which means essentially I didn't know what I was doing. I was eating butter. I had no idea how to eat. I was eating seeds, like out the yin yang, and I packed on the pounds, and it made me very uncomfortable. I didn't feel good, didn't feel energized, and I wasn't really in ketosis. Now I'm on a ketogenic diet. I feel fantastic. My energy is stabilized. So it's all about doing it properly. And this is where I recommend either getting a proper ketogenic diet made for you or hiring a professional ketogenic coach who can take you through the process. Number 2, high protein can be quite effective, again, if done properly. So again, you want probably a practitioner or a coach who can take you through this, because it's a steep learning curve. And I spent like 7-10 years learning how to properly eat, how to properly exercise, how to listen to my body. With high protein, you can have too much protein. You can have not enough carbs. You can still have those insulin crashes depending on the food that you're eating. If you're eating a lot of high glycemic index foods like sugars, then even natural sugars in this case, you're going to get those plummets in energy. You're going to get those plummets because your insulin is going to spike. You're going to get really, really fatigued and tired. Your inflammation is going to go up. And it's just a disaster from there on. So you have to be eating the right amount of carbohydrates and the right carbohydrates when you're on a high protein diet. You also need to think about timing. You need to be thinking about how often am I eating meals in order to make sure that my insulin is stabilized, because if there's too much time, then you get that adrenal fatigue picture. So like I said, it comes back to where you are on the spectrum. Some women are going to experience greater degrees of insulin resistance versus others that won't. Insulin resistance equals inflammation. If you have underlying insulin resistance, you have inflammation in your body. Inflammation in your body is going to cause other issues. It's going to cause hormone imbalances. It's going to cause fatigue. It's going to cause brain fog. So you guys have probably heard of PCOS in the 4 types. I don't necessarily agree with that. It never resonated with me, considering the fact that, number 1, PCOS was genetic for me. Number 2, they put me on birth control. It was inflammatory from the beginning. I had insulin resistance from the beginning. I think the idea behind these 4 classifications of PCOS is we don't really understand the pathophysiology. And I have spent hours going through the pathophysiology with the different systems. And I actually wrote a 10-pager on my understanding of the pathophysiology. I'm not releasing that because it's my own intellectual property, but it's very, very interesting when you start to break it down in the pathways. And I think this putting people in 4 different categories is almost inappropriate, because it's more of a spectrum than it is a category, and you can overlap in the categories. So how do you explain somebody who has 4 different categories of PCOS versus like a spectrum, where that makes sense because you could technically be in 1 category, whereas you're up on the spectrum, you're technically in 4 categories. So that's my 2 cents. To each his own. Like, if you resonate with the categories, that's good for you. It's just something that me, as a person who has been through PCOS and a practitioner, I just don't agree with them. So coming back to insulin resistance. So this is going to be a very long video, and I'm realizing that now. So I think what I'm going to do is end it here, and we'll have a continuation series on PCOS and how you can heal PCOS. So leave in the comments if this was useful. Let me know what you think. I can share more about my journey, exercise experience, etc. And let me know what else you guys want to know. Okay, bye guys. Welcome back